They say love builds homes, but I've learned something different. Love might build them, but anger tears them down faster than any hurricane. That morning, my docket read, Burgoyne versus Burgoyne, claim $5,000 property damage, counterclaim $5,000 assault and emotional distress. Two people who once lived together, raising children and sharing bills, now stood on opposite sides of my courtroom, pointing fingers and pretending they didn't once share a bed, a kitchen and a dream. Lindsay Burgoyne, 33, the plaintiff, mother of two, quiet, pale, trying to hold herself together, her voice shaking between rage and exhaustion. Mark Burgoyne, 36, the defendant, a construction worker built like a wall and just as stubborn. His eyes avoided hers the entire time. They'd lived together for 3 years, unmarried, but tied by bills, dogs and children from previous relationships. Now everything, the furniture, the car, the silence, was broken. Parties have been sworn, the bailiff said. I looked at Lindsay. Miss Burgoyne, what brings you here today? She gripped her folder tight. Your Honor, Mark and I lived together in my house. After we broke up, he came back angry. He smashed my TV, broke the door, and threw my computer out the window. He also scared my kids and hurt my dog. I want him to pay for the damages. 5 dollars. I turned to Mark. Mr. Burgoyne? He rolled his shoulders. None of that's true. She went crazy after I told her I was leaving. I was packing my stuff. She blocked the door, screamed, and pushed me. The window broke by accident. She owes me money, half the rent and my tools she kept. The courtroom air thickened with bitterness. They weren't just fighting over money, but they were fighting to rewrite history. I asked Lindsay, how long had you two lived together? 3 years, she said. At first it was good. We both worked. He helped with my boys. Then he lost his job, started drinking. He'd punch walls when angry. My kids began hiding in their room. I turned to Mark. You ever hit her? His voice hardened. No, I'd never touch her. But yeah, I hit a wall or two. Better that than her. I said, you think that makes you noble? You still broke the house, he glared. She drove me to it. And there it was. The eternal excuse for violence. She made me do it. Lindsay handed me photos. Shattered glass on carpet, a dented door, a broken TV screen. That's the living room, she said quietly. After he left. My kids had to stay with my sister because they were scared to sleep there, Mark scoffed. Those pictures prove nothing. That door was old. The TV fell when she threw the remote. I leaned forward. So your defense is that gravity attacked the house? He bit his lip. Then Lindsay held up a repair estimate. $4,070 from a licensed contractor. I asked Mark, you work construction, don't you? He nodded. So you know what that damage costs. He looked away. Yeah, good, I said. Then you also know you're the one who caused it. Then came the moment that changed the tone of the entire room. Lindsay said softly, Your Honor, my kids still wake up when they hear a door slam. My oldest asks if Mark is coming back. He was never their father, but they thought he was. Mark looked at her for the first time. Don't bring the kids into this, I said. They're already in it. You brought them when you chose to fight instead of walk away. Silence. He shifted, whispering, I didn't mean to scare them. Lindsay replied, You didn't have to mean it. You just did. And for a brief second, neither looked like a liar. Just two broken people standing in the ruins of what used to be a family. I turned to Mark. You filed a counterclaim, $5,000 for assault and emotional distress. Explain that, he sat up. When she blocked the door, she hit me with her hand. I got a bruise? Did you call the police? No. Did you go to a doctor? No. Did you take pictures? No. So your proof is? Your imagination. He clenched his jaw. She's violent too, Lindsay whispered. All I did was stop you from taking the TV, he snapped. It was mine. I looked at him. Do you have a receipt? No. Then it was hers. That shut him up faster than any gavel. I leaned back, looked at the photos again and then at them. Here's what I find. The plaintiff has proven property damage caused by the defendant. The photos, repair estimates and testimony align. The defendant's counterclaim is unsupported. Judgment for the plaintiff, $5,000. Then I paused, looked at Mark. Mr. Burgoyne, breaking things doesn't fix anger. You want respect? Earn it by leaving people's homes the way you found them, intact. You think you were just venting, but you didn't just break her TV, you broke her children's sense of safety. He stared at the floor. I turned to Lindsay. Ms. Burgoyne, you win the case. But take my advice. Choose peace over pity next time. Don't let guilt keep broken men in your house. The gavel came down. Case closed. After court, they stood outside the double doors. He tried to speak. Linds! I'm sorry. She didn't look at him. Tell that to the kids. He hesitated. Can I see them? She shook her head. They're not yours anymore. He nodded slowly, realizing she didn't mean legally, she meant emotionally. And that hurt more than the verdict ever could. When she walked away, he whispered, I was just angry. But the hallway swallowed his voice, and for the first time, he understood what silence really felt like. That evening I stayed late in chambers. The file lay open on my desk, photos of glass, wood, and heartbreak. People like to think violence happens in dark alleys or bad neighborhoods, but most of it happens in living rooms, behind walls painted with promises. I've seen it too many times. A man who says, I didn't hit her, I just hit the wall. As if drywall can absorb trauma, anger doesn't stop at walls. It seeps through into children, into pets, into the air we breathe. The law can fix damages, but it can't fix fear, and that's what stays long after the gavel falls. The echo of someone yelling, the slam of a door that used to mean, welcome home. When I finally turned off the lights, I thought of the kids, the ones who learned too early that love can sound like breaking glass. And I whispered to myself, you can rebuild a house, but you can't rebuild trust once it's shattered. I've always said this. Words can't draw blood, but they can kill reputations faster than a bullet ever could. That morning, my docket read, Haskett versus Woolfolk. Claim $5,000 for defamation and emotional distress. On the surface, it was just a letter. On paper, just words. But in the quiet of one small neighborhood, that letter was a bomb. Nancy Haskett, 44. The plaintiff, a single mother, sharp-tongued but proud. She owned a small cleaning business, knew everyone on her street, and prided herself on her good name. When she walked into my courtroom, her chin was high, but her eyes were red. Linda Woolfolk, 47, the defendant. Her former friend and neighbor. A woman who smiled like she didn't care, which, in my experience, usually means she cared too much once and got bitter about it. Between them once stood friendship. Now just accusation. Parties have been sworn, the bailiff said. I looked at Nancy. Ms. Haskett, tell me what happened. She took out a folded paper, worn from being handled too many times. Your Honor, this letter was mailed to 6 of my neighbors' widows and to my son's school. Says I'm a drunk, that I cheat people in my cleaning business, and that my ex-husband left because I'm on welfare and sleep around. It's signed anonymously, but the handwriting, it's hers, she pointed at Linda. Linda smiled faintly. It's not illegal to tell the truth, I raised an eyebrow. So you admit you wrote it? She hesitated. I wrote something, but it wasn't slander. Everything in there I heard from other people, I said. Then you didn't just spread gossip, you upgraded it to print. The gallery laughed softly. Nancy continued. After that letter, my client started cancelling. The principal at my son's school called me in, said they were concerned. I lost 3 contracts and people stopped waving when I passed. You can fix a broken window, Judge, but you can't fix a rumour. Linda crossed her arms. She acts like she's perfect. But she's had cops at her house before. Loud fights, parties, you name it.
I just wanted the neighborhood to know who they're dealing with. I leaned forward.
Ms. Woolfolk, Neighborhood Watch doesn't mean character assassination, she shot back. Well, maybe if she wasn't such a fake, I wouldn't have had to warn people, I said. And maybe if you minded your own business, we wouldn't be here. I took the letter from Nancy and read aloud. Part of it. Beware of Nancy Haskett. She drinks, lies, and steals from her clients. Her son's father left because of her affairs. She's currently being investigated for welfare fraud. I looked up.
That's a lot of bold print for a whisper, Linda shrugged.
People deserve to know, I asked. Was she actually investigated for welfare fraud? No. Was she ever charged with theft?
No, so none of this is true. It's what people said. People say a lot of things, I replied.
That's why courts like mine exist, to separate gossip from evidence. Nancy called her friend Marcia, a neighbor. Marcia testified, Judge, I've known Nancy 8 years. She's loud, sure, but honest. When that letter came, people were calling me asking if it was true. It made her a pariah overnight.
Even her clients stopped answering her calls. I asked Linda, did you mail these letters?
Yes. Did you sign them? No. Then you knew they were wrong. Otherwise you'd have signed proudly. She said nothing. I asked, Miss Woolfolk, why did you write this? Her eyes flashed.
Because she tried to steal my boyfriend. That's why.
She pretended to be my friend while flirting with him right in my house. Nancy turned red.
I didn't even like your boyfriend. Linda yelled, liar! Quiet, I said. Then I sighed.
So all this because of jealousy? Linda crossed her arms. Call it justice. I said, no, justice comes with a judgment. What you did comes with postage. I asked Nancy, how did you prove she wrote it? She said, I compared the handwriting.
I have old notes from her. Same slant, same loops on the Y.
And the envelopes were mailed from the same post office 2 blocks from her house. I looked at Linda. You dispute that? She looked down. No, I said, good, saves us time. Then I asked, do you understand what defamation means? She shrugged. Saying bad things about someone? Close, I said. It means saying false bad things that harm their life. And from where I sit, your letter is Exhibit A in how to ruin a person's life for sport. The courtroom fell silent. I folded the letter and set it down slowly as if the paper itself were poison. Here's what I find. The defendant, Ms. Woolfolk, authored and distributed false written statements about the plaintiff to her community. The statements were malicious and caused financial and emotional harm. Judgment for the plaintiff or $5,000. Then I looked directly at Linda. Ms. Woolfolk, you used your pen like a weapon.
You didn't just write lies, you mailed them, like bullets with stamps.
Next time you feel angry, write in a diary, not an envelope. She started to speak, but I cut her off. And don't say I'm sorry. If you were sorry, you wouldn't have sealed those envelopes in the first place. Then to Nancy. Ms. Haskett, you can rebuild your business, but don't rebuild your friendship. Some people don't deserve to be forgiven. They deserve to be forgotten. The gavel came down. Case closed. That evening, I sat in chambers, the letter still in my hand. It felt heavier than paper, like it carried the weight of every rumor ever whispered. People underestimate gossip.
They think it's small talk.
But I've seen it destroy marriages, careers, neighborhoods. Words don't vanish when you drop them. They echo across mailboxes, phone calls, and dinner tables. I thought of Nancy walking her son to school, feeling eyes on her back. And I thought of Linda sitting at home, pretending she'd won something. But gossip doesn't give you victory, tongue just emptiness. Because when you poison someone else's well, you still have to drink from the same water. I placed the letter in the evidence file and whispered, next time someone hands you a rumor, hand it back. Because justice doesn't just punish lies. It reminds us that silence sometimes is the truest form of decency. They say death and taxes are the only things you can't escape. But I've seen marriages die trying to outrun both. That morning's docket read, Baszler versus Cora. Claim $3,200 for unpaid tax debt following divorce. A small claim on paper, but behind that number was a 10-year marriage, 2 children, and a mountain of resentment tall enough to block any light that might have remained between them. Deborah Baszler, 38, the plaintiff, an accountant's assistant, polished, precise, with a voice that sounded like she'd rehearsed for this day. Michael Cora, 40, the defendant, a former contractor now working odd jobs. He had the charm of a man who used to win arguments with a smile, and the exhaustion of someone who'd learned it, stopped working. They'd been married for 10 years, divorced for 2. But the tax year that ended it all was still haunting both. Parties have been sworn, the bailiff said. I looked at Deborah. Ms. Baszler, tell me why you're here. She took a breath, straightened her papers. Your Honor, when Michael and I were married, we filed joint taxes. In our last year together, 2022, he took a job, made extra income under the table, and didn't report it. The IRS audited us. Because the return was joint, they came after both of us for $3,200 in back taxes and penalties. I paid it because they threatened to garnish my wages. I want him to reimburse me for his half. I turned to Michael. Mr. Cora? He exhaled. Judge, we were married. Everything was shared. She knew about the money. Now she's acting like she didn't benefit when I used that cash to fix her car, buy groceries, pay bills. She can't rewrite history, I said. That's what every defendant in a divorce case tries to do, turn guilt into nostalgia. I examined the documents. Joint return, audit notice, IRS payment receipt in Deborah's name. Mr. Cora, I said, this payment was made after the divorce, correct? He nodded. Yeah, so you didn't pay a dime of it? He shook his head.
I didn't have it.
I was unemployed. Did you offer a payment plan?
Anything?
He shrugged. Didn't seem necessary. She handled finances better. Of course she did, I said. That's why she's in court, and you're in trouble. Deborah handed me a copy of their divorce decree. A single line was highlighted. Each party shall be responsible for any debts incurred in their own name following the date of separation. I looked up. The date of separation? She said March 2022. I checked the audit notice. It was issued in July 2023 for tax year 2022, so, I said, the debt arose after separation, but from income earned before it. Michael smirked. See? It's shared, I said. No, Mr. Cora, shared income doesn't mean shared deceit. I turned back to Deborah. How did you find out he had unreported income? She said, I didn't, the IRS did. They sent a notice saying he'd been paid for contract work he never disclosed. When I asked him, he said it was side cash and didn't count. Michael interjected, it was odd jobs. Fixing fences, doing roofs, small stuff.
I leaned forward.
Mr. Cora, the IRS doesn't care if you got paid in checks, cash, or poker chips.
Income is income.
You can't file it under I didn't feel like it, he groaned. I didn't mean to cause her trouble. I said, intent doesn't erase consequence.
Ask any tax attorneys or ex-wife. Deborah's voice softened. It's not even the money, Judge. It's the principle.
I worked so hard to rebuild after the divorce. New apartment, new job. And I get a notice saying I owe thousands for something he did. It felt like the marriage wouldn't let me go. Michael looked down.
I didn't think they'd come after her. I thought they'd just forget about it. I said, you thought the IRS would forget?
That's adorable. The courtroom chuckled, but Deborah didn't. She whispered, he always thought life worked that way. Ignore it until someone else fixes it. Mr. Cora, I said, did you file separately after the divorce? No, why not?
I didn't know how. So you stopped paying taxes altogether?
He hesitated. Kind of, I said. Ignorance isn't a tax strategy. Then to Deborah, did you give him a chance to pay before filing suit? Yes. I sent 3 letters and a certified notice. He never responded. He muttered, I was embarrassed. I said, Mr. Cora, embarrassment is cheaper than interest. You should try it sooner next time. I closed the file. Here's what I find. The tax debt was a direct result of the defendant's unreported income during the marriage. The plaintiff paid the full amount under legal obligation. The defendant benefited from the funds and failed to contribute to repayment. Judgment for the plaintiff, $3,200 plus court costs. I looked at him. Mr. Cora, marriage means sharing, but divorce means accountability. You don't get to keep the benefits of your dishonesty and leave her holding the bill. Then to Deborah. Ms. Baszler, you win today, but don't let this victory keep you bitter. The IRS may have cleared the debt, but life's too short to keep emotional receipts. The gavel came down. Case closed. That night I sat at my desk long after everyone left. The courthouse was quiet, that kind of silence that feels like paperwork. The file lay open before me. Names,
Numbers, signatures, evidence of a love story reduced to a balance sheet. Money doesn't kill marriages.
but what it reveals often does. I thought about Deborah, organized, disciplined, determined to clean the mess. And Michael, careless, not cruel, just one of those men who think sorry can be a form of payment. In the eyes of the IRS, they're both numbers. In the eyes of the court, they're X's. But in the eyes of life, they're just two people who stopped listening when it mattered most. The truth is simple. Marriage is a partnership. Divorce is an audit, and both expose what was really happening all along. As I filed the case away, I whispered something I'd once told another couple years ago. Love makes you sign your name on the same line. Regret begins when you realize the IRS uses the same one to collect. I've always said this. Words can't draw blood, but they can kill reputations faster than a bullet ever could. That morning, my docket read, Haskett versus Woolfolk, claim $5,000 for defamation and emotional distress. On the surface, it was just a letter.
On paper, just words.
But in the quiet of one small neighborhood, that letter was a bomb. Nancy Haskett, 44. The plaintiff.
A single mother, sharp-tongued but proud.
She owned a small cleaning business, knew everyone on her street, and prided herself on her good name. When she walked into my courtroom, her chin was high, but her eyes were red. Linda Woolfolk, 47. The defendant. Her former friend and neighbor, a woman who smiled like she didn't care, which in my experience usually means she cared too much once and got bitter about it. Between them once stood friendship.
Now just accusation. Parties have been sworn, the bailiff said. I looked at Nancy. Ms. Haskett, tell me what happened. She took out a folded paper, worn from being handled too many times.
Your Honor, this letter was mailed to 6 of my neighbors and to my son's school. It says I'm a drunk, that I cheat people in my cleaning business, and that my ex-husband left because I'm on welfare and sleep around. It's signed anonymously, but the handwriting, it's hers. She pointed at Linda. Linda smiled faintly. It's not illegal to tell the truth. I raised an eyebrow. So you admit you wrote it? She hesitated. I
wrote something.
But it wasn't slander.
Everything in there I heard from other people, I said.
And you didn't just spread gossip. You upgraded it to print. The gallery laughed softly. Nancy continued.
After that letter, my clients started cancelling.
The principal at my son's school called me in, said they were concerned. I lost 3 contracts and people stopped waving when I passed. You can fix a broken window, Judge, but you can't fix a rumor. Linda crossed her arms. She acts like she's perfect, but she's had cops at her house before. Loud fights, parties, you name it.
I just wanted the neighborhood to know who they're dealing with. I leaned forward.
Ms. Woolfolk, Neighborhood Watch doesn't mean character assassination. She shot back. Well, maybe if she wasn't such a fake, I wouldn't have had to warn people, I said. And maybe if you minded your own business, we wouldn't be here. I took the letter from Nancy and read aloud. Part of it. Beware of Nancy Haskett. She drinks, lies, and steals from her clients. Her son's father left because of her affairs. She's currently being investigated for welfare fraud. I looked up. That's a lot of bold print for a whisper. Linda shrugged.
People deserve to know. I asked, was she actually investigated for welfare fraud?
No. Was she ever charged with theft? No. So none of this is true. It's what people said. People say a lot of things, I replied. That's why courts like mine exist, to separate gossip from evidence. Nancy called her friend Marcia, a neighbor. Marcia testified, "Judge, I've known Nancy 8 years. She's loud, sure, but honest. When that letter came, people were calling me asking if it was true. It made her a pariah overnight."
Even her clients stopped answering her calls. I asked Linda, did you mail these letters?
Yes. Did you sign them?
No. Then you knew they were wrong. Otherwise you'd have signed proudly. She said nothing. I asked, Ms. Woolfolk, why did you write this?
Her eyes flashed.
'Cause she tried to steal my boyfriend. That's why.
She pretended to be my friend while flirting with him right in my house. Nancy turned red.
I didn't even like your boyfriend. Linda yelled, liar! Quiet, I said. Then I sighed.
So all this because of jealousy? Linda crossed her arms. Call it justice. I said, no, justice comes with a judgment. What you did comes with postage, I asked Nancy. How did you prove she wrote it? She said, I compared the handwriting. I have old notes from her. Same slant, same loops on the Y. And the envelopes were mailed from the same post office 2 blocks from her house. I looked at Linda. You dispute that? She looked down. No, I said. Good. Saves us time. Then I asked, do you understand what defamation means? She shrugged. Saying bad things about someone? Close, I said. It means saying false bad things that harm their life. And from where I sit, your letter is Exhibit A in how to ruin a person's life for sport. The courtroom fell silent. I folded the letter and set it down slowly, as if the paper itself were poison. Here's what I find. The defendant, Ms. Woolfolk, authored and distributed false written statements about the plaintiff to her community. The statements were malicious and caused financial and emotional harm. Judgment for the plaintiff at $5,000. Then I looked directly at Linda. Ms. Woolfolk, you used your pen like a weapon. You didn't just write lies, you mailed them like bullets with stamps. Next time you feel angry, write in a diary, not an envelope. She started to speak, but I cut her off. And don't say I'm sorry. If you were sorry, you wouldn't have sealed those envelopes in the first place. Then to Nancy, Miss Haskett, you can rebuild your business, but don't rebuild your friendship. Some people don't deserve to be forgiven, but they deserve to be forgotten. The gavel came down. Case closed. That evening I sat in chambers, the letter still in my hand. It felt heavier than paper, like it carried the weight of every rumor ever whispered. People underestimate gossip. I think it's small talk. But I've seen it destroy marriages, careers, neighborhoods. Words don't vanish when you drop them. They echo across mailboxes, phone calls, and dinner tables. I thought of Nancy, walking her son to school, feeling eyes on her back.
And I thought of Linda sitting at home, pretending she'd won something. But gossip doesn't give you victory, even just emptiness. 'Cause when you poison someone else's well,
you still have to drink from the same water. I placed the letter in the evidence file and whispered, next time someone hands you a rumor, hand it back. Because justice doesn't just punish lies, it reminds us that silence sometimes is the truest form of decency. Ink fades. Reputations don't. I've always said this. Words can't draw blood, but they can kill reputations faster than a bullet ever could. That morning, my docket read, Haskett versus Woolfolk, claim $5,000 for defamation and emotional distress. On the surface, it was just a letter.
On paper, just words.
But in the quiet of one small neighborhood, that letter was a bomb. Nancy Haskett, 44. The plaintiff.
A single mother, sharp-tongued but proud.
She owned a small cleaning business, knew everyone on her street, and prided herself on her good name. When she walked into my courtroom, her chin was high, but her eyes were red. Linda Woolfolk, 47. The defendant, her former friend and neighbour, a woman who smiled like she didn't care, which in my experience usually means she cared too much once and got bitter about it. Between them once stood friendship.
Now just accusation. Parties have been sworn, the bailiff said. I looked at Nancy. Ms. Haskett, tell me what happened. She took out a folded paper, worn from being handled too many times.
Your Honour, this letter was mailed to 6 of my neighbours and to my son's school. It says I'm a drunk, that I cheat people in my cleaning business, and that my ex-husband left because I'm on welfare and sleep around. It's signed anonymously, but the handwriting, it's hers. She pointed at Linda. Linda smiled faintly. It's not illegal to tell the truth. I raised an eyebrow. So you admit you wrote it? She hesitated. I
wrote something.
But it wasn't slander.
Everything in there I heard from other people, I said.
And you didn't just spread gossip. You upgraded it to print. The gallery laughed softly. Nancy continued.
After that letter, my clients started cancelling.
The principal at my son's school called me in, said they were concerned. I lost 3 contracts and people stopped waving when I passed. You can fix a broken window, Judge, but you can't fix a rumour. Linda crossed her arms. She acts like she's perfect, but she's had cops at her house before. Loud fights, parties, you name it.
I just wanted the neighbourhood to know who they're dealing with. I leaned forward.
Ms. Woolfolk, Neighbourhood Watch doesn't mean character assassination. She shot back. Well, maybe if she wasn't such a fake, I wouldn't have had to warn people, I said. And maybe if you minded your own business, we wouldn't be here. I took the letter from Nancy and read aloud. Part of it. Beware of Nancy Haskett. She drinks, lies, and steals from her clients. Her son's father left because of her affairs. She's currently being investigated for welfare fraud. I looked up. That's a lot of bold print for a whisper. Linda shrugged.
People deserve to know. I asked, was she actually investigated for welfare fraud?
No. Was she ever charged with theft? No. So none of this is true. It's what people said. People say a lot of things, I replied. That's why courts like mine exist, to separate gossip from evidence. Nancy called her friend Marcia, a neighbour. Marcia testified, Judge, I've known Nancy 8 years. She's loud, sure, but honest. When that letter came, people were calling me asking if it was true. It made her a pariah overnight.
Even her clients stopped answering her calls. I asked Linda, did you mail these letters?
Yes. Did you sign them?
No. Then you knew they were wrong. Otherwise you'd have signed proudly. She said nothing. I asked, Ms. Woolfolk, why did you write this?
Her eyes flashed.
Because she tried to steal my boyfriend. That's why.
She pretended to be my friend while flirting with him right in my house. Nancy turned red.
I didn't even like your boyfriend. Linda yelled, Liar! Quiet, I said. Then I sighed.
So all this because of jealousy? Linda crossed her arms. Call it justice. I said, no, justice comes with a judgment. What you did comes with postage, I asked Nancy. How did you prove she wrote it? She said, I compared the handwriting. I have old notes from her. Same slant, same loops on the Y. And the envelopes were mailed from the same post office 2 blocks from her house. I looked at Linda. You dispute that? She looked down. No, I said. Good. Saves us time. Then I asked, do you understand what defamation means? She shrugged. Saying bad things about someone? Close, I said. It means saying false bad things that harm their life. And from where I sit, your letter is Exhibit A in how to ruin a person's life for sport. The courtroom fell silent. I folded the letter and set it down slowly, as if the paper itself were poison. Here's what I find. The defendant, Ms. Woolfolk, authored and distributed false written statements about the plaintiff to her community. The statements were malicious and caused financial and emotional harm. Judgment for the plaintiff at $5,000. Then I looked directly at Linda. Ms. Woolfolk, you used your pen like a weapon. You didn't just write lies, you mailed them like bullets with stamps. Next time you feel angry, write in a diary, not an envelope. She started to speak, but I cut her off. And don't say I'm sorry. If you were sorry, you wouldn't have sealed those envelopes in the first place. Then to Nancy, "Miss Haskett, you can rebuild your business, but don't rebuild your friendship. Some people don't deserve to be forgiven, they deserve to be forgotten." The gavel came down. Case closed. That evening I sat in chambers, the letter still in my hand. It felt heavier than paper, like it carried the weight of every rumour ever whispered. People underestimate gossip. I think it's small talk. But I've seen it destroy marriages, careers, neighbourhoods. Words don't vanish when you drop them. They echo across mailboxes, phone calls, and dinner tables. I thought of Nancy, walking her son to school, feeling eyes on her back.
And I thought of Linda sitting at home, pretending she'd won something. But gossip doesn't give you victory, even just emptiness. Because when you poison someone else's well,
You still have to drink from the same water. I placed the letter in the evidence file and whispered, "Next time someone hands you a rumour, hand it back. Because justice doesn't just punish lies, it reminds us that silence sometimes is the truest form of decency." Ink fades. Reputations don't. There are many ways to lose your freedom. Some people lose it behind bars. Others lose it behind their own arrogance. That morning, my docket read, Birmingham versus Cameroni. Claim, defamation. A corrections officer suing a former inmate.
a strange pairing. The jailer versus the jailed. He said she lied about him online. She said she finally told the truth. I've been doing this long enough to know. When someone says that's not what really happened, it usually means they're afraid you might believe it did.
The plaintiff, David Birmingham, tall, broad-shouldered, in uniform even though he didn't need to be. He wanted to remind everyone of his authority, even outside the prison walls. His jaw was tight. He kept his hat under his arm like a soldier. The defendant, Judy Cameroni, mid-30s, plain clothes, the kind of woman who looks like she's been fighting the world since birth. Her eyes darted between me and the floor. Cautious, but not ashamed. She'd been out of prison less than a year. And yet there she was, standing tall against the man who once held the keys to her cell. "Parties have been sworn," the bailiff said. I looked at Birmingham. "Mr. Birmingham, what is your claim?" He stood stiff, voice clipped like a police report. "Your Honour, this woman made false statements about me on the internet. She accused me of mistreating inmates, of harassment, of unethical behaviour. I've been in corrections for 20 years. Her lies damaged my reputation." He handed me printouts, screenshots of online posts, dated months earlier. I turned to Cameroni. "Ms. Cameroni, did you write these?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am. Everything in those posts happened." Her voice trembled, but only slightly, like someone standing on shaky legs but refusing to sit down. Birmingham scoffed. "Lies. She's an ex-con with an agenda." I looked at him. You'd be surprised how many people with records tell more truth than those without. The first post read, "Officer Birmingham used to humiliate female inmates, especially the ones who cried. He'd make jokes about their families, their kids. He said we were animals who deserved cages." The second, "He grabbed me once when I didn't move fast enough, told me I should be grateful it wasn't worse." The third, "They tell you prison is about justice. It's not, it's about control." I read them aloud in court. The air changed. Even Birmingham stopped pretending not to care. "Ms. Cameroni," I said, "did you report this at the time?" She nodded. "To the warden, nothing happened. They said, 'He's one of our best officers.'" "Maybe you misunderstood." I turned to Birmingham. "Did you grab her?" His eyes narrowed. "Of course not. She says you did. She's lying." "Then you won't mind if I call her former cellmate as a witness?" He hesitated, and that hesitation said more than any denial. The bailiff brought in a woman named Marcy Green, another former inmate. She looked nervous, but determined. I asked, "Ms. Green, did you witness any interaction between Ms. Cameroni and Mr.
Birmingham?" She nodded. "Yes, Your Honour. He used to make comments about women's bodies, about how we looked in uniforms. He told Judy she needed to smile more if she wanted parole. One time, he grabbed her arm. I saw it."
Birmingham's face turned red. "She's making this up," Marcy snapped back. "You think we'd risk coming here just to lie? We got nothing to gain." I raised my hand. "That's enough. Mr. Birmingham, sit down." He did, reluctantly. I've presided over enough cases to know when truth walks in the room. And that woman's truth came shaking, but solid. I turned to Birmingham. "You've been an officer for 20 years. You know how much power a uniform carries. When you walk into a cell block, your word is law. But here's the thing. The law still has laws," he glared. "I did my job. Your job isn't to humiliate people, it's to protect the system that holds them accountable. There's a difference." He shifted, voice low. "You don't know what it's like in there, Judge. They test you every day. If you show weakness, you lose control." I leaned forward. Control doesn't come from cruelty. It comes from integrity. The kind you seem to have misplaced. The courtroom went quiet again. Sometimes silence isn't about fear. Sometimes it's about truth settling in. I asked Cameroni, "Why post this online?" She hesitated. "Because nobody believed me when I said it out loud. I thought if people saw his name, maybe someone else would speak up too." "Did they?" She nodded. 4 women messaged me privately, said they'd seen or heard the same kind of thing, but they're scared to come forward. He still works there." Birmingham clenched his fists. None of them filed complaints. I said, "Maybe they were too afraid of you to try." He looked like he wanted to argue, but didn't. Then Cameroni said quietly, "I wasn't trying to ruin him. I just didn't want to feel invisible anymore." Her words hung there like smoke, impossible to ignore. I asked Birmingham, "Did your department investigate after her post?" He nodded stiffly. "Yes, they cleared me." "Internal investigation?" "Yes." "Conducted by your colleagues?" "Yes." "Then that's not an investigation, Mr. Birmingham. That's a family meeting." A few chuckles broke the tension, but I didn't smile. "The question isn't whether she embarrassed you. The question is whether what she said was false. And you haven't given me one piece of evidence that it was." He stared at the table. Cameroni added softly, "If telling the truth ruins someone's reputation, maybe it's the reputation that's the problem." I glanced at her, and the kind of glance that says, "You just said something I wish I'd written myself." I gathered the papers, his printed screenshots, her trembling honesty, and the weight of every woman who'd ever been told to be quiet. Here's what I find. The defendant, Ms. Cameroni, made statements online regarding her experience as an inmate under Officer Birmingham's supervision. The plaintiff, Mr. Birmingham, has presented no credible evidence that these statements were false or malicious. Truth is an absolute defense to defamation. Judgment for the defendant. Case dismissed. I looked at Birmingham. "Mr. Birmingham, your uniform doesn't make you untouchable. It makes you accountable. Maybe next time think about that before you file a lawsuit meant to silence someone." Then I turned to Cameroni. "Ms. Cameroni, telling the truth takes courage. Just remember, courage doesn't need to be loud. Sometimes it just needs to be steady." The gavel came down, case closed. After court, I watched them through the glass. Birmingham walked out first, shoulders stiff, pride intact, but dignity dented. Cameroni lingered, still shaking, still absorbing the fact that she'd finally been believed. As she reached the door, she turned back, just for a moment, and whispered, "Thank you. It wasn't for me, it was for herself. For the part of her that hadn't been broken in that cell." That night, I sat alone in chambers. The file lay open on my desk. His complaint, her posts, the official report that said, "No evidence." It's funny how bureaucracy can wash away guilt better than soap. I thought about all the women like her, the ones who get lost between the lines of justice. They serve their time, but the system never stops punishing them. And men like Birmingham, they mistake power for protection. They wear their authority like armor, never realizing that armor can rust from the inside. People think freedom begins when the cell door opens, but for some, it begins when someone finally says, "I believe you." I closed the file and whispered, "Justice isn't about punishment.
It's about restoration. The truth doesn't defame, it defends.
If I've learned one thing after decades on the bench, it's this. Money and romance don't mix unless you're ready to lose one. That morning's docket read, Barry versus Sakagian. Claim, personal loan repayment, $2,500. On the surface,
It looked simple.
underneath, it was a love story gone bad, with a receipt instead of roses. Two young people who once swore they'd be together forever, now glaring at each other over $2,500 and a broken promise. Jennifer Barry, 28, smart, articulate, the kind of woman who keeps her bank statements alphabetized. Her voice had that controlled calm of someone who's practiced not to cry. Paul Sakagian, 31, nicknamed the Cajun, charismatic, funny, charming, the sort of man who can talk his way out of anything except debt. They met in Louisiana. She was working in marketing. He was a bartender with musician dreams. He called her his angel investor. She thought he meant it as a joke. Turns out, he didn't. Parties have been sworn, the bailiff announced. I looked at Jennifer. "Miss Berry, tell me why you're here." "Your Honor, I lent Paul $2,500 last year so he could buy a used truck to start a food delivery business. He said he'd pay me back within 2 months. I have text messages where he calls it a loan." She handed over her neatly printed exhibits. I turned to Paul. "Mr. Sakagian?" He grinned, half sheepish, half defensive. "Judge, it wasn't a loan. It was a gift."
We were dating.
She said she wanted to help me get on my feet. Jennifer's jaw tightened. "I said I'd help you start your business, not fund your lifestyle." Paul shrugged. "Same difference." "She loved me," I said dryly. "Love doesn't come with an interest rate, but apparently it should." I read the messages. "Jennifer, I'll transfer the $2,500 today. You'll pay me back when the business starts making profit." Paul, "Deal, baby."
I won't forget. You're my angel. I looked up.
"That looks like a loan to me." Paul shifted. Those texts were flirty. We joked a lot. "She wanted me to succeed. Did you ever pay anything back?"
I asked. He shook his head.
"I bought her dinner, plenty of dinners," Jennifer shot back. "Dinner isn't repayment. It's digestion." The gallery laughed.
I didn't. Why did the relationship end?
I asked. Jennifer sighed. "Because every time I asked for the money, he said I was nagging. Then one night I saw him post pictures of a trip to Florida with another woman.
I realized my business loan funded their vacation. Paul rolled his eyes.
That trip was months later. "Different money," I said. "The only thing different here is your definition of honesty." Paul leaned forward, voice softening. "Judge, I didn't mean to hurt her. When she gave me the money, I really thought I'd pay it back. But the truck broke down. Then COVID hit."
I lost work. I figured she'd understand, Jennifer whispered. I understood everything except the silence. He looked at her.
"I just didn't want to admit I failed." And there it was, the truth under all the noise. I said, "Failure isn't shameful, Mr. Sakagian. Running from it is." "Mr. Sakagian," I said, "you claim this was a gift. Why would she keep a record of the transfer, save every text, and ask you for repayment if it were, he stammered.
Because she's organized?
The gallery chuckled. I smiled thinly. She's organized, you're improvisational. That's how we end up here. Then to Jennifer. Did you ever say the word gift? Never. He begged me not to go to my family for a loan because he said it would make him look irresponsible. I nodded.
That's because he was, Paul slumped. Judge, you're really not on my side, are you?
I said, I'm on the side of facts. Unfortunately for you, they filed for Ms. Barry. I closed the folder. Here's what I find. The plaintiff transferred $2,500 with explicit written expectation of repayment. The defendant acknowledges receiving it and provided no credible proof of repayment or that it was a gift. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $2,500. Then I added, without interest because love already charged enough. Jennifer smiled faintly. Paul looked at the floor. I said, Mr. Sikagian, when someone believes in you enough to invest in your future, the least you can do is not spend that investment on margaritas and heartbreak. The gavel came down. Case closed. After court, they lingered in the hallway.
I watched from behind the glass. Paul turned to her. I'll pay you, Jen. I mean it this time, she nodded. I don't need the promise.
Just the check, he half smiled. You always were the banker in this relationship. She replied, and you were the overdraft. They both laughed, quietly, sadly, and went their separate ways. Some debts, I thought, can be repaid. Others can only be remembered. That night I sat alone in chambers, the case file still on my desk, a $2,500 loan. A relationship that didn't survive it. I've seen it too many times. A gift that wasn't a gift, a loan that wasn't written down, a heart that believed a handshake could replace a signature. People think small claims court is about money.
It's not.
It's about proof of what was said, of what was meant, and of what love hides until it breaks. Jennifer wanted accountability. Paul wanted forgiveness. Neither got exactly what they wanted, but both got what they needed, an ending. When I left the courthouse, I thought of something my father once told me. Never lend money to someone you wouldn't trust with your heart. Because in the end, they'll break both the same way, slowly, with excuses, and when it's over, the only thing left is the lesson. Love isn't a loan, but if you borrow trust, you still owe interest. There's nothing more dangerous than youth without guidance, and nothing more painful than watching a child pretend to be an adult in front of me. That morning, the docket read, Brown versus Bros, claim, repayment of attorney's fees and engagement ring. Two names, barely out of childhood.
One boy, one girl, both too young to understand what a promise really costs. They thought love was forever.
The law thought otherwise. Tyler Brown, 18, the plaintiff. Tall, nervous, trying to act older than he was. He wore a tie too tight and a face too young for the courtroom. Mary Bros, 17, the defendant. Soft voice, sharp eyes. The kind of girl who's already had to grow up too fast. They had a baby together. They also had a ring, a broken engagement, and a bill for a lawyer neither of them could afford. And now they had me. Parties have been sworn, the bailiff said. I looked at Tyler first. Mr. Brown, tell me why you're here. He cleared his throat. Your Honor, Mary and I were engaged last year. I bought her a ring for $200, then things fell apart. We broke up. I asked for it back. She refused. Also, I paid half the lawyer's fees for a custody agreement for our baby. She promised to reimburse me, never did. I turned to Mary. Ms. Bros? She shifted in her chair. The ring was a gift.
He gave it to me on my birthday. And the lawyer?
He wanted custody, not me.
I didn't ask for any of this. I leaned back.
The language of teenage love, expensive and legally unenforceable. I asked Tyler, how old were you when you bought the ring?
16, he said proudly. With what money?
I worked part-time at a gas station. And you thought buying a $200 ring at 16 was a good investment? He frowned.
It was for love, I sighed.
So is poetry. It's cheaper. The courtroom laughed softly. Mr. Brown, I continued, at 16 you were a minor, which means any contract you entered into, including this so-called engagement, is legally voidable. In plain English, it means you can't sue someone over a promise made while you were still a kid. He looked stunned. So she just gets to keep it? Mary looked down. Legally, I said, it's complicated.
Morally? We'll get there, I turned to Mary. You two have a child together, correct?
She nodded.
Yes, a boy. He's one, I softened my voice.
Who hired the attorney for the custody arrangement?
Tyler did, she said.
He said he wanted visitation rights.
I didn't fight him.
He told me we'd split the fee.
I didn't have the money, I asked Tyler. How much was it?
$600, he said.
I paid it all. Do you have proof?
He handed me a receipt. I read it aloud. Payment to family attorney. Child custody filing. I looked at Mary. You benefited from that agreement? She hesitated. Yes, then you owe half. Responsibility doesn't vanish just because your wallet's empty. I turned back to Tyler. Why did you two break up? He sighed. She said I was controlling.
I was just trying to be a dad.
She started seeing someone else.
I couldn't take it. Mary's voice cracked.
He wanted to tell me who to see, where to go.
I'm still in school. I just wanted to be a mom and a teenager, he muttered. That's not how it works, I said. You're right, Mr. Brown. Parenthood isn't part-time.
But neither is growing up. They both looked at me. Too proud to cry, too scared to admit how lost they were. I'd seen this before. Young hearts trying to live adult lives. It always ended the same way, and it with a lesson neither wanted to learn. I asked Mary, "Did you ever intend to return the ring?" She bit her lip. At first, no. Then I thought about pawning it, but it felt wrong. So where is it now? In a drawer.
I couldn't wear it.
It just reminded me of everything we lost. I nodded slowly. Then it's not jewelry anymore. It's evidence of heartbreak. But under the law, it's also conditional, given in contemplation of marriage. Since the marriage didn't happen, the ring should go back, she whispered. Even if it's my birthday gift? Yes, engagement rings are promises with price tags. When the promise dies, so does the gift, Tyler exhaled. For the first time, relief crossed his face. I gathered the papers, the receipts, and what was left of their pride. Here's what I find. The engagement ring, valued at $200, remains the property of the plaintiff. The defendant must return it within 10 days. Regarding attorney's fees, the defendant benefited from the custody agreement and is responsible for half the cost. Judgment for the plaintiff, $600 plus return of ring. I looked at Tyler. Mr. Brown, don't confuse fatherhood with ownership. You can't control her life, indeed only be responsible for your child's. Then to Mary, Ms. Brose, you made mistakes too. Growing up doesn't mean growing bitter. You owe him money, not hatred. The gavel came down. Case closed. They stood in the hallway, quiet. Mary looked at him.
You really wanted it back?
He shrugged. Not really.
I just wanted to know you still had it. She smiled faintly.
Then come get it.
It's in my mom's jewelry box, he nodded. Tell the baby I'll call tonight, she whispered. He knows your voice. For a brief moment.
They weren't exes or enemies, just two scared kids holding the same future from opposite ends. That evening, I sat in chambers, the file open before me. 2 names, 1 baby, 1 mistake that would take years to untangle. The law can't teach love. It can only teach consequence. People think these teenage cases are trivial, but they're not. They're warnings. When I see faces like Tyler and Mary, I don't see defendants. I see children trying to wear the weight of adulthood like clothes that don't fit. They think parenthood will make them grown-ups. But growing up isn't about having a child, and it's about being one less child yourself. The law can give custody, but it can't give character. That part has to be learned the hard way, through courtrooms, broken promises, and a judge who refuses to let them forget what responsibility really means. As I turned off the lights, I thought of the baby. Too young to understand any of this, but one day He'll ask about the parents who once stood in front of a judge.
Fighting over a ring and a receipt, and maybe, just maybe,
He'll learn from what they couldn't. You can't raise a child until you stop being one. There's a kind of silence that comforts you, the quiet after a long day, the stillness of home. And then there's another kind, the silence that watches you, listens when you don't speak, and makes every creak in the wall feel like a whisper. That morning's docket read Garland versus Schweikala. Claim, illegal surveillance and unpaid rent. A tenant accusing her landlord of spying.
a landlord insisting she's paranoid. In most cases, one of them is lying.
But in this one, both were telling the truth in their own way. Anita Garland, 42, the plaintiff. A nurse, quiet, meticulous, the kind of woman who pays her bills early and locks her doors twice. She'd rented an apartment for 3 years. Then one day, she stopped sleeping. Mark Schweikala, 48, the defendant. Her landlord, former electrician. The kind of man who knows how to fix anything, including, apparently, trust. When she walked into my courtroom, Anita clutched a small recorder in her hand. When he walked in, Mark carried an invoice for unpaid rent. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about fear. Parties have been sworn, the bailiff said. I looked at Anita. Miss Garland, tell me what happened. Her hands trembled slightly. Your Honour, a few months ago I started hearing noises at night. Clicks, faint hums, like a wire lives somewhere it shouldn't be. I called the phone company. They said my line was clean.
Then I found this. She held up a small black box with a red light.
It was behind the air vent in my bedroom. My neighbour said it looked like a microphone.
I moved out the next day, Mark snorted. That's not a microphone.
That's a motion sensor, I turned to him.
Installed by you? Yes, I put sensors in all my units.
Helps with energy efficiency. Did you tell your tenants? He hesitated. No one asked. I raised an eyebrow. They don't have to ask, Mr. Schweikala. Privacy isn't optional. Anita's voice cracked. I stopped changing in my bedroom.
I slept on the couch for a week. I felt like someone was watching me. I called the police.
They took the device for testing. I read the report. It wasn't a standard motion detector. It had a transmitter. Mark shifted uneasily. I bought them in bulk online. Didn't know they had that feature. I said, Mr. Schweikala, that's like saying you bought a gun and didn't know it could fire. He frowned. I wasn't spying.
I just wanted to protect my property, Anita whispered. You can protect walls.
You don't get to own my peace of mind. Mark handed me papers. She broke her lease, left 2 months early.
Owes me $200 rent, Anita protested.
I left because I didn't feel safe. I have a police report. He shrugged. Fear isn't a lease clause. I looked at him sharply. Neither is eavesdropping. I read through the police findings aloud. The device found in plaintiff's apartment was a wireless microphone capable of transmitting up to 100 feet. It was powered through the wall's electrical wiring. The installation required professional skill. I turned to Mark. That sound like an accident to you? He swallowed.
I didn't put that one there.
Maybe a previous tenant? Stop, I said. The building's only 3 years old. He said nothing. I leaned forward. Mr. Schweikala, I've seen all kinds of landlords. The lazy, the greedy, the careless. But you, sir, are something new, the curious. And that's the worst kind. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I asked Anita, did you pay rent for the months before you left? She nodded. Yes, I paid through April. I moved out in May. Did you give notice? Yes, I have the letter, Mark interrupted. She left my unit uncleaned.
Trash everywhere, she turned to him, furious. You bugged my bedroom and you're worried about trash.
The courtroom went still, I said quietly. That's enough. Both of you. Then softer. Ms. Garland, you did the right thing leaving.
You don't negotiate with fear. I closed the file.
Here's what I find. The defendant, Mr. Schweikala, violated the tenant's right to privacy by installing a device capable of audio transmission without her knowledge or consent. His counterclaim for rent is denied. Judgment for the plaintiff, $200 representing return of deposit and emotional distress. I looked at him. You can't fix this with an apology or a paint job. You broke something you can't replace, a sense of safety. And no landlord has the right to own that. Then to Anita, you were brave to bring this forward. Don't let fear make your world smaller. The gavel came down. Case closed. Outside the courtroom, Anita stood by the door, shoulders shaking but smiling faintly. Mark walked past her, eyes down. She said quietly, I hope you never know what it feels like to be watched. He stopped.
I wasn't watching you, she nodded.
That's what they all say. Then she turned and left, a woman reclaiming her silence. That night, I sat at my desk long after everyone else had gone home. The file lay open. A small black box, no bigger than a bar of soap, had turned one woman's sanctuary into a nightmare. We live in a world where privacy is an illusion. Phones listen, cameras watch, walls have wires. But what scares me isn't the technology, man, it's the people who use it to feel powerful. Landlords, lovers, parents, employers. Everyone wants to know more. But sometimes knowing isn't caring, it's control. Mark thought he was protecting his property. Anita thought she was losing her mind. They were both wrong. She was right to be afraid. And he learned that curiosity without consent isn't security, it's surveillance. When I finally closed the file, I thought of something I tell my grandchildren. If someone needs to spy on you to feel safe, they were never safe to begin with. Privacy isn't a luxury. It's the rent we all pay for being human. They say you can't teach common sense. And after 30 years on the bench, I can confirm some people don't even try to learn it. That morning, the docket read, Alush versus Harris, claim breach of contract for stud service. $200. I remember staring at the paper and thinking, here we go again. Stud service. For the uninitiated, that means breeding dogs. I've had cases about unpaid rent, broken cars, even stolen wedding dresses. But few things reveal human absurdity quite like people fighting over dog romance. Sabrina Alush, 29, the plaintiff, a dog breeder from Bakersfield, small but fierce, with a folder full of receipts and a chip on her shoulder. Her dog, Rocky, was a champion Pomeranian. Tiny, fluffy, and, according to her, a heartbreaker with perfect genetics. Tina Harris, 32, the defendant, a self-proclaimed dog lover with a backyard full of barking evidence. She owned Luna, a female Pomeranian, slightly less perfect, but equally adorable. When they walked into my courtroom, they didn't look at each other, like two ex-lovers who'd shared custody of a secret. In this case, one very uncooperative dog. Parties have been sworn, the bailiff said. I turned to Sabrina.
Miss Alush, tell me what happened. She flipped open her folder.
Your Honour, Tina and I agreed that my male Pomeranian, Rocky, would mate with her female, Luna. In exchange, she'd pay me $200 for the stud service, whether Luna got pregnant or not. She wrote the agreement herself and on a napkin at the diner. I raised an eyebrow.
A napkin?
Yes, ma'am. It says, Rocky plus Luna, $200 at first tie. And she signed it. I nodded.
Of course she did.
Nothing says legally binding like a ketchup stain. The gallery laughed. I turned to Tina. Ms. Harris, your response? She shrugged.
Judge, Luna didn't get pregnant.
So I didn't pay.
I thought that's how it works. No puppies, no payment. Sabrina jumped in. That's not how it works. He did his job.
I raised a hand. Ms. Alush, let's keep this courtroom rated G. I examined the napkin. It was creased, smudged, and smelled faintly of coffee. Still, the words were legible. Rocky plus Luna, $200 at first tie.
Signed T. Harris, I asked. Ms. Harris, is this your signature?
She nodded.
Yeah, but I didn't mean for it to be serious. I leaned forward.
Then why did you sign it? Because she kept talking about paperwork, and I just wanted to shut her up. Congratulations. I said dryly. You succeeded until now. So, Ms. Alush, I said, did the breeding occur? She nodded. Yes, Your Honor, twice on separate days. And did Ms. Harris witness it? She dropped Luna off and picked her up the next day. I turned to Tina. You confirm? She groaned. Yeah, but nothing happened. When I got Luna back, she looked the same. I blinked.
You were expecting what, a baby shower?
The courtroom laughed again. I said, whether Luna gave birth is irrelevant. The payment was due at the time of service, which according to your own handwriting was first tie. She frowned. But isn't it unfair to pay for nothing? No, I said, because what you paid for was the attempt, not the outcome. Even human doctors don't guarantee results. At that point, Tina crossed her arms.
Judge, this is ridiculous. I could have done the same thing for free if I'd let Luna loose at the dog park.
Sabrina gasped.
How dare you compare my Rocky to some stray?
Tina shot back. At least the strays work for free.
I banged the gavel. Enough! We're not turning this into a soap opera for pets. Then I leaned back.
Ms. Harris, let me explain something. When you write an agreement, even on a napkin, and sign it, you're creating a contract. It doesn't matter if it's typed, handwritten, or carved on a tree. The law doesn't care about the medium, only the meaning. Her face fell. So I have to pay? Yes. And next time, if you want something for free, adopt, don't contract. Ms. Alush, I said, you're asking for $200 plus costs? Yes, Your Honor. I had to take time off work and drive to her place twice, and she blocked me on Facebook. I raised an eyebrow. Facebook is not emotional damages. It's emotional relief, laughter again, but beneath it there was something tender. These were two women who'd once called each other friends, now at war over a dog. I asked quietly, were you two close before this? Sabrina nodded. We met at a kennel show. She helped me once when Rocky got sick.
I thought we were friends. Tina's expression softened. We were, until she started treating me like a customer. That's the thing about business, I said.
It kills friendship faster than fleas kill puppies. I gathered the napkin, the photos, the receipts, and the fragments of their friendship. Here's what I find. The written agreement, though informal, constitutes a valid contract. The service was performed. The payment was due. Judgment for the plaintiff, $200. I looked at Tina. Ms. Harris, contracts don't disappear just because you regret them. If you want fairness, next time read before you sign.
Or bring a lawyer, not a napkin. Then to Sabrina.
Ms. Alush, you win. But if you value your peace, don't do business with friends, especially the ones who think responsibility is optional. The gavel came down. Case closed. They stood in the hallway. Sabrina turned to her. You really thought I was trying to scam you? Tina sighed. No, I just didn't think it was such a big deal. It wasn't, until you made it one. Tina smiled weakly. I'll send the money.
Keep Rocky away from Luna, Sabrina laughed.
Don't worry. He has better taste now. For a brief second, they both smiled. Two stubborn women who had finally remembered they weren't enemies, just human. That evening I sat in my chambers, staring at the napkin, the one we'd kept for the record. It was ridiculous and profound at the same time. Two people, one napkin, and the entire machinery of the legal system grinding to make sense of it. People think small claims court is about money.
It's not.
It's about promises and the strange, fragile ways we try to make them real. Sometimes it's a handshake, sometimes it's a text, and sometimes it's a greasy napkin scribbled with hope and coffee stains. The law doesn't care what paper you use. It cares whether you meant it. I turned off the lamp and thought, maybe the world would be a little kinder if people took their words as seriously as they take their dogs. A contract is a promise, no matter what it's written on. I still remember the way the air felt that morning, heavy, unmoving, as if the walls of the courtroom themselves were holding their breath. Every case leaves a trace, but this one started with a sound, not of voices or footsteps, but of splintering wood. They were already waiting when I walked in. A woman sitting perfectly still, her hands folded tightly in her lap and across from her. A man too comfortable in his own confidence. Stephanie Intrieri versus Paul Woodcock. She said he broke into her home. He said he was just doing his job. But deep down, I knew this case wasn't about a door. It was about the meaning of safety and what happens when someone mistakes authority for permission. Stephanie Intrieri, early 40s. Disabled from a car accident, she walks with quiet dignity. Her voice, though soft, carries the exhaustion of someone who's had to explain her pain too many times before. Paul Woodcock, mid-50s.
Real estate broker.
He enters like a man who's used to rooms opening for him. He avoids her eyes, yet adjusts his tie each time I look at him, a nervous tick wrapped in arrogance. They had never met before that day, but one afternoon in May, their worlds collided at the edge of a door, hers locked, his pried open. "Parties have been sworn," the bailiff said. I nodded, opened the file and let the silence speak first. I turned toward her. "Miss Intrieri," I said, "tell me why you're here." She looked up slowly, eyes damp but steady. "Because he broke into my apartment, Your Honor." Her hands trembled as she spoke, fingers pressing against each other for balance.
I was home, sick. I heard the bell ring, once, then again, harder. I didn't answer because I wasn't expecting anyone.
Then I heard metal, scraping, the front gate shaking. Someone was forcing it. I could see the moment replaying in her mind, like a film looping behind her eyes. "And what did you do?"
I asked. Her breath caught. I called 911. I told them someone was breaking in. I didn't know it was him until the police arrived. Then I turned to him. Mr. Woodcock leaned forward slightly, the faintest smirk on his face. "Your Honor, I didn't break in."
"I had a showing scheduled for that property."
"It was business." There it was. The word that always tries to excuse bad judgment. Business. I asked her to explain how the showings were usually arranged.
She straightened, grateful for something orderly to hold on to. Always with notice. A letter or a phone call. My husband would coordinate, and we'd open the home ourselves. 4 times before, all properly arranged. And on May 13th? "No notice, Your Honor. The only letter we got was for May 14th. She handed me the paper with both hands, careful like it was proof of her sanity. I looked at it, May 12th, the date clear as daylight. Inspection, Wednesday, May 14th. I turned my gaze to him. "You arrived a day early," he blinked, his smile faltering. "It must have been a mix-up." "Mr. Woodcock," I said, "mix-ups don't require locksmiths." He looked down for the first time. The audience behind him shifted, the quiet kind of murmur that comes when everyone realizes the story doesn't fit. He tried to recover. "I had people waiting, the lender, the appraiser. I called the seller's attorney when no one answered. She told me to enter." I tilted my head. "Do you have that in writing?" A pause. He smoothed a crease on his sleeve.
"No, Your Honor, it was over the phone." I've been doing this long enough to know that truth hesitates. Lies rehearse.
His answer had too much polish, not enough pulse. "So let me understand," I said slowly. "You forced entry into a tenant's apartment without written authorization, based on a phone call you can't prove." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "Yes." The words hung in the air like the echo of a slammed door. I turned back to her. She was twisting a tissue in her hand. "What happened when the police arrived?" I asked. She swallowed. I went downstairs.
I was in my nightclothes.
The officers were there, and him. He looked at me and said, "Why didn't you open your door?"
Her voice broke on the last word. I couldn't stop shaking. I called my doctor that night. I couldn't sleep for days.
I kept checking the locks. She wasn't describing a legal wrong. She was describing a wound. He shifted in his seat again, but I caught the flicker of guilt. Or maybe just the discomfort of being seen clearly for the first time. I leaned back. "Mr. Woodcock," I said quietly, "this isn't about property. It's about principle. You may have keys to buildings, but you don't have keys to people's lives. He exhaled sharply, as if trying to release the weight that had finally settled on him. Even if she hadn't been home, I continued, you had no right to enter. Being a broker doesn't grant immunity from decency. He nodded slightly, eyes fixed on the floor. His arrogance had slipped away, leaving something smaller. Maybe shame, maybe just surprise. The facts were simple. He sent notice for May 14th. He arrived on May 13th. He broke in without consent, without proof of authorization. Law is not about convenience, I said. It's about boundaries. And as always, came the line that ends every story but never ends its echo. Judgment for the plaintiff. $3,000. The gavel struck. She exhaled, the sound halfway between relief and exhaustion. He stood motionless, his hands tightening around his papers as if he could still control something. They left through opposite doors. For a moment, the courtroom was silent. Not empty, just still, like the air after a storm. I sat there longer than usual, looking at the photograph of the broken lock in her file. It wasn't the damage that stayed with me. It was the look in her eyes when she described that sound. That's what fear really is, not the breaking itself, but the waiting. The helpless pause before you know if it's over. Justice can't rebuild a door, but it can redraw the line that should never have been crossed. This case reminded me that authority without empathy is just arrogance dressed as order. You can have all the contracts, letters and titles in the world, IT, but if you forget respect, you've already trespassed. She walked away with a judgment. He walked away with a lesson. And I walked away reminded that the loudest sound in justice isn't the gavel. It's the silence that follows when truth finally settles in. Because justice, at its heart, isn't about who wins. It's about who remembers. When authority breaks the lock, justice holds the key. Justice isn't always about right and wrong. Sometimes it's about how seriously people take their own words. That morning, the courtroom smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Outside, Manhattan buzzed.
Inside, time slowed.
2 men waited at opposite tables. One looked like life had given him more work than reward. Sleeves a little frayed, eyes hopeful. The other radiated the kind of confidence that comes from being recognized on the street. Donald Earl Irusi versus Kenny Kramer. On paper, it was about a few $100s. In truth, it was about recognition, the need to be seen, the need to be believed. I knew this case would not end with money. It would end with a mirror. Donald Irusi, 50, community volunteer, part-time stagehand, a man who still believes that a handshake means something. He stands stiffly, shoulders squared, as if respect can be willed into existence. Kenny Kramer, 53, comedian, talk radio personality, self-proclaimed inspiration for the Kramer character on Seinfeld. His grin walks the line between charm and performance. They once shared enthusiasm for a political prank turned publicity stunt, Kramer for mayor. One sought purpose, the other sought publicity. Now they meet again, not on a stage, but in my courtroom. Parties have been sworn, the bailiff said. I adjusted my glasses and looked first at Donald. He cleared his throat, gripping the edge of the plaintiff's table. Mr. Irusi, I began. Why are you here? He looked directly at me. His voice carried a kind of restrained desperation. Because, Your Honor, Mr. Kramer promised to pay me 50 cents for every signature I gathered for his mayoral petition.
I spent weeks on the street, rain and shine.
He never paid me a dime. His hands trembled slightly. Whether from nerves or conviction, I couldn't tell. I turned to the defendant. Kramer leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, wearing the calm of someone accustomed to applause. Your Honor, he said, smiling faintly. It was all in fun, a spoof campaign. He volunteered. Everyone knew it wasn't a paying gig. I raised an eyebrow. So you're saying he imagined the money? I'm saying, he answered, he misunderstood the spirit of the thing. Spirit or not, misunderstandings have consequences. I gestured for Donald to continue. He leaned forward, his words tumbling over each other. Your Honor, I'm not some fool chasing celebrity.
I believed in the project.
He said we'd build momentum, that I'd get compensated when the signatures came in. I walked half the city, parks, subway stations. People laughed at me, but I kept going. He slid a weathered folder across the table, photocopied petitions.
Hand-scribbled notes. I looked at them. Names smudged by rain, corners bent.
They smelled faintly of ink and effort. He continued, quieter now. He thanked me once on TV, said I was the guy who makes democracy happen. Then nothing. Calls ignored, promises forgotten. As he spoke, Kramer's grin stiffened. I watched Donald's eyes, that fragile combination of pride and hurt. He wasn't chasing money. He was chasing acknowledgement. Mr. Kramer, I said, your turn. He stood, adjusting his blazer, performing even in posture.
Look, Judge, it was satire, a joke.
A parody of politics. Nobody was getting paid. I gave him campaign buttons, coffee, camaraderie. That was the deal. His tone was smooth, rehearsed. I watched him carefully. Beneath the humor there was impatience. He wanted the matter gone, erased by charisma. Did you ever tell him there'd be no payment? I asked. He hesitated.
A heartbeat too long. Not in so many words. But you did say something about 50 cents per signature. Maybe in passing as a joke? A joke, the refuge of the careless. I leaned back.
Intent hides in tone, I thought. Donald opened his folder again, producing a flyer. Here, Your Honor. This was printed for the campaign. It says, volunteers rewarded per signature. I didn't make this up. Kramer squinted. That wasn't official. Someone mocked that up for fun. I studied the page. The typeface was uneven, but the phrase was clear. Rewarded, not thanked. Rewarded. Mr. Kramer, I said, you understand the difference between humor and obligation? He shrugged. Sometimes the line's thin, Judge. Not in contract law, I replied. He smiled again, but this time the smile didn't reach his eyes. The room fell quiet. Paper rustled, fluorescent lights hummed. That kind of silence tells me I'm nearing the truth, the space where pride begins to crumble. I asked the question that usually turns cases like this. Mr. Kramer, if it was a joke, why does he still believe it? Why didn't you correct him? He looked genuinely puzzled for a second. Because I thought he understood. We were all laughing. It was showbiz. Donald's chair scraped against the floor as he stood halfway, anger breaking through his politeness.
I wasn't laughing. I believed you. I raised a hand. Sit down, Mr. Irusi. He obeyed, but his face flushed deep red. In that moment,
I felt the clash between two worlds, the working man who measures words by effort and the entertainer who measures them by effect. Gentlemen, I said, the law doesn't punish humor, but it doesn't reward carelessness either. Both looked at me, one with hope, the other with concern. I leaned forward. Here's the problem, Mr. Irusi. You have effort, but no contract. There's no proof of agreed payment, no receipts. Good faith is not a binding document. He looked down, defeated. I turned to Kramer.
And you, Mr. Kramer, you hide behind irony.
You used enthusiasm as free labor. That may not be illegal, but it's not decent. He nodded slowly, finally quiet. When you speak, I continued, people listen.
That's power.
Power means responsibility, not punchlines. He said nothing. For the first time all day, he seemed smaller. The law must be consistent, I said. There's no written agreement, no proof of payment terms. On the claim of compensation judgment for the defendant, Donald exhaled sharply, eyes glistening. I paused. However, I added, Mr. Kramer, fairness isn't limited to paperwork. You owe this man respect. You said you'd reward effort. So here's what you'll do. Make good on your words in spirit. You'll appear with him at the next charity fundraiser you host as partners. Not boss and worker equals, he blinked, surprised. Yes, Your Honor. Sometimes justice isn't a check. Sometimes it's a reminder. The gavel struck once, not hard, just enough. They left side by side, awkwardly silent. I watched through the glass as they exchanged a few words in the hallway. No smiles, just a nod that looked almost like peace. I stayed seated, the file still open before me. The page read, Intrieri vs. Kramer, claim for $500. But that's not what it was about. It was about how quickly good intentions become exploitation when people stop listening. Some cases fade the moment the cameras shut off. This one stayed with me because every promise carries a price, not always in dollars, but in integrity. I've seen contracts worth millions, and I've seen handshakes worth more. The paper doesn't make it real. The honesty does. Kenny Kramer walked out with his wallet intact, but his ego dented. Donald Intrieri walked out without money, but with validation, the kind that lets a man stand a little straighter. And I was reminded that the law cannot teach sincerity, but it can make people pause long enough to see its absence. When I left the courtroom that evening, the city was loud again, horns, laughter, the rhythm of lives colliding. Promises float everywhere here, in ads, in politics, in love. But only some are meant to last. Justice isn't about punishing broken promises. It's about reminding people why they should keep them. I locked my chambers and thought of the two men, one chasing acknowledgement, the other hiding behind irony. Different worlds, same lesson. In court, words are evidence. Outside, they're everything tagline. When words are sold cheaply, justice raises the price. Justice can't measure affection. It can't balance passion or rewrite heartbreak. But sometimes the courtroom becomes the place where people try. That morning, I walked into the courtroom knowing exactly what kind of storm waited for me. Two people who had once shared everything, laughter, weekends, whispered plans, now sat divided by a table, surrounded by silence sharp enough to cut. John Courtroom versus Gwen D'Amato. On the surface, a civil claim for $25,000. Underneath it, resentment, pride, and the ache of unfinished love. When people bring love to court, they never walk out with what they came for. John Courtroom, 52, accountant, a man who once found order in numbers but chaos in the heart. He sits upright, his hands folded like a man performing control. Behind his calm, I can sense the pulse of injury. Not physical, but emotional. Gwen D'Amato, 48, marketing consultant. Elegant without effort, the kind of woman who learned that silence can be stronger than argument. Her posture speaks of fatigue, but her eyes still carry warmth, and something like regret. They were lovers for 5 years. He helped pay her bills, financed a few dreams, maybe tried to buy a little loyalty along the way. When it ended, he wanted his money back, or did as if love could be itemized. In my courtroom, they're not ex-lovers anymore. They're plaintiff and defendant. Parties have been sworn, my bailiff announced. I opened the file, black ink on white paper, simple words trying to hold complicated history. I looked at him first. Mr. Courtroom, tell me why you're here. He cleared his throat, eyes flicking briefly toward Gwen before returning to me. I loaned Ms. D'Amato $25,000 over the course of our relationship.
I have bank statements and checks.
When we broke up, she refused to repay me. His tone was calm, but I could hear the tremor beneath it, the crack where dignity meets disappointment. I turned to Gwen. She met my gaze without flinching. Your Honor, she said softly, those weren't loans.
They were gifts. He wanted to help.
He said it made him happy. She paused. I didn't ask for repayment because there was nothing to repay. The air between them thickened, a 5-year love story reduced to accounting. I gestured for him to continue. He adjusted his glasses,
hands shaking slightly as he opened a folder.
"Here, Your Honor. Check copies."
Payments to her mortgage, her car, even a trip we took to Florida.
She said she'd pay me back when she got her bonus.
That never happened. He tapped the pages, his voice hardening.
It wasn't charity. It was an agreement. I watched him. His jaw clenched after every sentence, as if each word cost him something. "Did you have that agreement in writing?" I asked. He hesitated. "No, ma'am." It was verbal. "Anyone witness it?"
No, it was private. Private? The word people use when they mean unprovable. I leaned back.
"So the only evidence you have that these were loans is your belief?" His eyes flashed. "It's not a belief, it's the truth." He looked at her again, voice trembling now. "She used me, Your Honor. I paid her rent.
I bought her furniture.
Then one day she said she needed space. Next thing I know,
She's gone. And I'm left paying the credit card bills." His anger filled the room like smoke. Gwen's eyes glistened, but she stayed still,
her hand resting lightly on the table. When it was her turn, she didn't rush. "Your Honor," she began, "John was generous. Too generous sometimes. He liked to feel needed."
I never asked for those things, he offered. Her voice was calm but heavy.
"When I tried to refuse, he'd say, 'Don't insult me, I want to take care of you.'" She looked down, twisting a ring on her finger. "I think he believed money could keep me from leaving." I watched her face as she spoke. There was no malice, just fatigue. The kind that comes from retelling pain. "When we broke up, I didn't owe him money."
I owed him gratitude, and I gave it. I told him thank you.
"But he didn't want thanks. He wanted me back." John leaned forward, eyes burning.
That's not true.
I raised my hand. "Mr. Kofod, you'll have your turn." He sat back, muttering under his breath. She slid an envelope across the table. "These are the birthday cards, Your Honor, the ones that came with the checks." I opened one. In neat handwriting, it read, "Happy birthday, my love."
I'm proud of you.
"Don't worry about the bills, and I've got you covered." I looked at him. His face went pale.
Did you write these? I asked. He nodded slowly. Yes, but that was before she left you.
He swallowed. "Yes. Did you ever write 'This is a loan' or 'Please repay me'?"
No, I let the silence stretch.
Sometimes silence reveals more than testimony. "Mr. Kofod," I said gently, "these letters don't sound like contracts."
They sound like affection. He said nothing.
His hands tightened into fists. That was when I saw it. The shift. The legal argument was gone. What remained was wounded pride. "Your Honor," he blurted out, "this isn't just about the money."
It's about what she did to me. I gave her everything. I thought she'd marry me. There it was.
The real case. Gwen's eyes filled, but she didn't speak. "She said I was controlling," he continued, voice cracking.
I was just trying to keep us together. I leaned forward.
"Mr. Kofod, I believe you cared for her, but you can't sue someone for falling out of love. The law doesn't repair heartbreak." He stared at me, speechless. "You can call it generosity or you can call it regret," I said, "but it's not a debt." The courtroom fell utterly silent.
Even the hum of the lights seemed to fade. That's the moment when reality finally reaches the one who's been chasing revenge disguised as justice. I straightened the papers before me. On the claim of $25,000 in alleged loans, judgment for the defendant.
"The plaintiff's claim is dismissed." His face tightened, but he said nothing. "And Mr. Kofod," I added, "this courtroom is not a place to rewrite love stories. You used the law to demand what the heart never owed."
That's not justice. That's resentment. He nodded slowly, defeated, but somewhere behind his eyes I saw relief.
Maybe he'd been waiting for someone to tell him it was over. Gwen exhaled softly, her shoulders lowering for the first time since she entered. I struck the gavel. "We're done." They left without looking at each other. Through the glass door, I watched them drift down opposite hallways. Two people, once bound by affection, now connected only by silence. He moved briskly, clutching his briefcase like a shield. She walked slower, head high, as though reclaiming a piece of herself with every step. The courtroom emptied, but the echo of their argument lingered. I sat for a while after they left. The file still lay open, his check stacked beside her letters. Love and logic staring at each other, neither winning. People come to court for money, but often what they really want is closure. They think a ruling will erase the ache. It doesn't, it just names it. John Kofoid didn't lose a case that day. He lost the illusion that affection can be refunded, and Gwen D'Amato didn't win. She just walked out with her dignity intact, which in the end was all either of them ever really owned. Love doesn't fit inside legal language. It's messy, irrational, full of generosity that never asks for a receipt. The law can define transactions.
It can't define intentions. What I saw in that courtroom was not fraud. It was grief.
A man trying to turn heartache into justice. But justice doesn't heal. It clarifies. When I left that day, I thought about how easily affection turns into accusation once pride takes the wheel. Sometimes the hardest thing to say isn't, "You owe me." It's, "I forgive you." Outside the sky was grey, but not storming, just undecided. I locked my chambers, and as I walked past the empty hallway, their faces lingered in my mind. Two people who once said "I love you" now couldn't say goodbye. Justice can't fix that. But it can remind us what not to confuse: generosity with obligation, memory with proof, and loss with ownership. Love is not a contract.
It's a risk.
And sometimes the only way to settle it is to let it go. When love becomes evidence, truth stands alone. Some cases arrive in my courtroom already bleeding, not from violence, but from the wounds that betrayal leaves behind. Friendship is a fragile thing. It can survive distance, envy, even time, but rarely can it survive blame. That morning, the air in the courtroom carried the weight of something broken long before the summons was filed. Two women sat across from each other, once inseparable, now strangers with the same hurt in their eyes. Trina Mortley versus Tanya Ford. A dog fight, they called it. But that wasn't the truth. It wasn't the dogs on trial. It was the end of trust. I've always said, when people sue someone they once loved, what they're really asking for isn't money. It's acknowledgement that they were wronged. Trina Mortley, 45, veterinary technician, calm and articulate. She walks with a slight hesitation, not from fear of court, but from the invisible bruises that disappointment leaves behind. Tanya Ford, 44, entrepreneur, proud owner of a large German shepherd named Diesel. Outspoken, confident, the kind of woman who hides guilt behind defiance. They'd been friends for 8 years, neighbors, shared barbecues, movie nights, and holidays. Their dogs, Trina's smaller spaniel Milo, and Tanya's Diesel, had once played together in the same yard. Until one afternoon, when play turned into panic, and friendship turned into something neither could name. "Parties have been sworn," the bailiff announced. I looked up from the case file. "All right, Ms. Mortley, you're the plaintiff."
"Tell me what happened," she exhaled, steadying herself.
Her eyes darted briefly toward Tanya before returning to me. "Yes, Your Honor, I was walking my dog Milo outside Tanya's house. Diesel, her dog, was in the yard, but the gate wasn't latched.
I waved to Tanya, and before I could say anything, Diesel pushed the gate open and ran straight at Milo. Her hands tightened around the edge of the plaintiff's table.
He grabbed Milo by the neck.
"Shook him," I screamed.
I tried to pull them apart, but Diesel wouldn't let go. I could hear the echo of that scream in her voice, the kind that only comes when fear and helplessness collide.
I finally got Milo free.
He was bleeding.
I rushed him to the vet.
He needed stitches and antibiotics. It cost me over $1,200. She swallowed hard. Tanya didn't even call to ask how he was. I turned to the defendant. "Ms. Ford?" Tanya straightened, crossing her arms. "Your Honor, Diesel's a good dog. He's protective." Milo barked first. He provoked him.
"It happened so fast." "I didn't mean for it to happen." "Did you have the gate secured?" I asked. Her jaw tightened.
Not that day. But Diesel had never done anything like that before. Trina looked down, shaking her head. That's not true. The friendship between them still hung in the room, brittle, ready to shatter at one more word. I leaned forward. Ms. Mortley, tell me more about your friendship with Ms. Ford. Her eyes softened. We were close, Your Honor. I helped her train Diesel when he was a puppy. We took our dogs to the park together. She trusted me with her keys when she went out of town. She hesitated. That day, I wasn't just scared for my dog.
I was scared because it was her dog. Her voice cracked slightly.
When I called her afterward, she said, "It's just a dog fight. Get over it." That's when I realized the friendship was gone. There it was. The truth beneath the testimony. People think I judge facts, but half the time I'm really judging heartbreak. Miss Ford, I said. Your turn. She lifted her chin. Your Honor, I feel terrible that Milo got hurt, but it wasn't Diesel's fault alone.
Milo was off-leash. Trina's head snapped up.
That's a lie. I raised my hand. Stop. One person at a time. Tanya's voice hardened. She knows her dog barks and snaps. Diesel just defended his territory. Did you see the incident yourself? I asked. She hesitated. I was on the porch.
I saw them after Diesel had already grabbed Milo, so you weren't close enough to stop it. Her lips pressed into a line. No? And you didn't check on Milo afterward? Her eyes flicked away.
I didn't know what to say. Guilt, always a fleeting thing, visible only in the moments between denial and silence. Trina reached into her folder, pulling out photos, a small dog, white fur matted with blood, a stitched wound near the shoulder. She slid them toward me. Tanya looked away. I studied them quietly. I've seen worse, but pain always deserves stillness. These are from the vet, Trina said softly. He was lucky to survive. And you paid for all the treatment? Yes, Your Honor. Do you have the bill? She nodded, handing me the invoice, $1,217.43. I turned to Tanya. Did you offer to help pay? Her voice was small now.
She never asked. I met her eyes.
She shouldn't have to ask. Sometimes responsibility doesn't need a request, just decency. I asked if there were any witnesses. Trina nodded. My neighbor, Mr. Palmer, caught it on his security camera. We played the video on the small courtroom monitor. The footage was grainy, black and white, but truth doesn't need high definition. You could see Trina walking Milo by the fence. Diesel's tail stiffens, his body lowers, then a sudden burst. The gate swings, the impact, the chaos. Tanya runs into frame seconds later, shouting, grabbing Diesel's collar too late. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the monitor. When it ended, Tanya spoke, almost whispering.
I thought the latch was closed. Her voice broke. I swear I didn't know. For the first time she looked at Trina, not as an opponent, but as a friend she'd wronged. Trina's eyes filled.
She nodded slightly just once. That tiny gesture carried more truth than any testimony. I closed the file and took a breath. Miss Ford, this case isn't complicated legally. Dog owners are responsible for their animals. Diesel caused injury, the gate was unsecured, and the plaintiff paid for the damage. Judgment for Ms. Mortley in the amount of $1,217.43. Tanya lowered her head. But I wasn't finished. You two were friends. That means something. You shared trust. The kind that can't be rebuilt with receipts. What you lost that day wasn't just safety, it was faith. I turned to Trina. Ms. Mortley, I know this isn't about money for you, but take this judgment as closure, not revenge. She nodded, tears barely contained. Ms. Ford, I continued, you made a mistake. That happens. What matters is what you do after. Call her, apologize properly.
That's something no judgment can order. But it's the only thing that still matters. The gavel fell softly.
Like punctuation on a sigh, they left the courtroom in silence, side by side but not together. Through the glass, I saw them pause at the hallway's end. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Tanya turned, said something I couldn't hear. Trina nodded. Not forgiveness yet, but the beginning of it. They walked in opposite directions. 2 lives untangled, 2 hearts slightly lighter. I stayed seated a while, the file still open before me. Friendship, like a leash, is meant to guide, not restrain. But when it breaks, both people end up running in circles, chasing something that used to be simple. This case reminded me that responsibility isn't just legal.
It's emotional.
We owe each other care, not just because the law says so, but because decency does. Tanya Ford didn't lose because of negligence alone. She lost because she forgot that friendship carries duty, the quiet kind, the one that doesn't wait for a summons. Trina Mortley didn't win because of evidence. She won because she stood for the principle that kindness should never cost you pain, and me. I left that day reminded that the law can close cases, but only honesty can close wounds. Later that evening, as I locked my chambers, I looked out the window. The sun was setting, gold bleeding into grey. Friendships end, dogs bite, gates fail. But people can still choose to mend what's broken. Justice doesn't demand perfection. It asks for accountability. And forgiveness, like a well-trained dog, only comes when called by name. When loyalty breaks its leash, justice must hold the chain. Justice isn't made for heartbreak. It was built for facts. Black and white, signatures and numbers. But every so often, 2 people walk into my courtroom carrying something no document can hold, the remains of a marriage. That morning, I could feel it before they even spoke. The stillness, the air charged with unsaid words. Jean Archambault versus Jeff Archambault. Ex-spouses. Partners, once in life, now opponents in law. The file said, civil dispute, $18,400, but the truth was heavier. It wasn't about money. It was about validation, about who gave more, who lost more, and who hurt more. People think marriage ends when love dies. They're wrong. It ends when generosity turns into a ledger. Jean Archambault, late 40s, strong, poised, the kind of woman who carries herself like someone who's had to rebuild too many times. She's a bookkeeper by trade. Numbers make sense to her. Feelings do not. Jeff Archambault, early 50s.
Former contractor, pragmatic, tired.
His face has the rugged softness of a man who's learned to apologize too late. They were married for 12 years. They built a home, raised 2 stepchildren, shared a business for a while. And then, when the affection faded, they tried to divide what couldn't be measured. Effort. Patience, pride. Today they came to me not to end something, but to prove who was right. Parties have been sworn, the bailiff announced. Jean stood straighter than most plaintiffs do. Your Honor, she began, I'm here because my ex-husband owes me $18,400, money I loaned him during our marriage to pay off his business debt. He promised to repay it after the divorce. He hasn't. Her voice was controlled, precise, like an accountant reading a balance sheet, not a woman revisiting her past. I turned to Jeff. He sighed, eyes fixed on the floor. Your Honor, there was no loan.
That money was part of our marriage.
I paid the mortgage, she helped with the business. We supported each other. That's what couples do. His tone was calm, but resentment flickered beneath the surface. Jean crossed her arms. It was a loan, not a gift. He looked up. And what about the years I carried her insurance, her car, her son's tuition? Silence. The kind that feels like a confession no one's willing to make out loud. I asked her to explain. She opened a folder of neatly labeled envelopes. Color-coded tabs, bank slips, signatures. Your Honor, this is proof I transferred $18,400 from my savings to his business account on March 3, 2017. He said he needed it to keep the company running.
I agreed, but on one conditions, that he'd pay me back once things stabilized. I looked through the documents.
Every number lined up like soldiers. Did he put that in writing? I asked. Her expression didn't change.
No, he gave me his word. The irony of a bookkeeper trusting in promises wasn't lost on me. She looked at him again, her voice softening just slightly.
We were still married, Your Honour. I thought his word was enough. Her shoulders fell. A rare crack in her composure. Sometimes in court, you see the exact second someone realizes where their hope had been misplaced. Jeff cleared his throat, adjusting his jacket.
Your Honor, when she gave me that money, it wasn't business-like, it was support. We were a team. I never asked for it, she insisted.
Said she believed in me? He leaned forward, voice gaining conviction. We had joint accounts, joint bills, joint dreams. Now she wants to act like she was a bank? That's not how marriage works. His words carried both frustration and exhaustion. The sound of someone reliving 1,000 dinner-table arguments condensed into one sentence. I asked, "Did you ever tell her you'd pay it back?" He paused, then said quietly, "I might have said I'd make it right. But I meant emotionally, not financially." Jean let out a bitter laugh. He never made anything right. He shot her a look, a mix of shame and defiance. She handed over a final piece of paper, a handwritten note. I unfolded it carefully. It read, "Thank you for the loan, honey. I'll pay you back once the next contract clears."
Love, Jay, I looked up at him.
"Is this your handwriting?" He hesitated. A long hesitation, the kind that reveals more than an answer ever could.
Yeah, he said finally.
But I didn't mean loan like that.
I was trying to make her feel secure. Secure?
I repeated. You wrote the word loan, he exhaled sharply.
I didn't think she'd use it against me later, she whispered.
I didn't think you'd forget it later. There it was, the emotional ledger of a failed marriage.
Open on my desk, Mr. Archambault, I said. Marriage is not a contract. But this note, this is...
You can't rewrite intent after the fact. He looked away, jaw tightening. I turned to Jean. But you also knew when you married him that love doesn't come with receipts. You chose to help, not invest. She blinked hard, unwilling to let tears fall in public. I continued. What I see here isn't greed, and it's grief. Both of you are trying to collect interest on affection that's already gone. Neither spoke. They just sat there, two ghosts of a life they'd built together, staring at the ruins they'd dragged into court. I took a deep breath and closed the folder. Here's what the law says, and only the law. A note of acknowledgement with the word loan and an expressed intent to repay creates a valid debt. Judgment for the plaintiff, $18,400. Jean let out a shaky exhale, half relief, half disbelief. Jeff nodded slowly like a man bracing himself for the final blow. But before you both leave, I said, let me tell you something the law doesn't say. They looked up. Money can be paid back. Dignity can't. When you start keeping score in a marriage, you've already lost. And when you bring love to court, there are no winners. Jean's eyes softened. Jeff's gaze dropped to the table. I struck the gavel once, softly. A mercy more than a judgment. They left without speaking. Through the glass door, I watched them walk down the hallway, parallel lines that would never meet again. He stopped to adjust his jacket. She paused to wipe her eyes, and for a fleeting moment they both turned, not toward each other, but toward what used to be. Then they kept walking. The bailiff began clearing papers, the room returning to order. But I sat still, because some verdicts echo louder than the gavel. Love and money, two forces that never balance evenly. He thought affection excused debt. She thought repayment could heal betrayal. Both were wrong. In my years on the bench, I've seen marriages end in 1,000 ways. Infidelity, silence, resentment. But the cruelest ending is when love turns into evidence. Jean won her case. Jeff lost his pride. And somewhere between the judgment and the hallway, both lost the thing they'd come to reclaim, closure. I once read, that forgiveness is giving up the hope of a better past. That's what I think about when I remember the Archambos, because in the end, it wasn't the money that broke them. It was the bookkeeping of the heart. When love becomes accounting, justice must close the books.